The ATF tried to outright defy the nationwide vacatur of the pistol brace rule, and they claimed that they, as the ATF, still had authority to regulate brace pistols as SBRs. But now they have had to walk back that statement, but they're still claiming some authority. So let's break down what is happening. Now, before we jump into this video, I want to thank the sponsor of this video, which is Attorneys on Retainer. When it comes to self-defense protection, don't settle for an insurance company or insurance limitations. AOR is actually backed by a real law firm, real attorneys. It's not insurance backed. It's not a company that has a ton of restrictions. If you acted in self-defense, AOR has your back, whether or not it's a good shoot, a gray area shoot, or it's a more complicated situation. And with AOR, you get direct access to an attorney 24/7, 365. Plus, they cover cases that others won't. That includes self-defense situations with potentially prohibited weapons, gun-free zones, and other incidents potentially like involving alcohol. So if you're interested in protecting yourself with the best coverage possible, check out AOR. You can check them out using the links down below in the details section and in the pinned comment. And if you use the code ARMEDSCHOLAR, you can get $50 off of your individual sign-up plan or $25 off of a family plan. As I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we need to talk about some very important news in the battle against the ATF and their current restrictions on all braced pistols as SBRs. Even though there's currently a nationwide vacatur of the pistol brace rule and multiple preliminary injunctions which are protecting various 2A organizations and their memberships, there were still employees and individuals within the ATF that were making statements that the ATF could still enforce the interpretation of the NFA that all braced pistols are in fact SBRs. This, of course, was very shocking and concerning, and in a response email of the ATF and the FIPB and that employee took the position that despite the fact that the pistol brace rule was in fact struck down entirely, the ATF could still take actions under the statutory text of the NFA and the GCA, or the National Firearms Act, and then also the Gun Control Act as well. Now, GOA, Gun Owners of America, responded to this shocking position of the ATF, and now the ATF had to walk back those very statements, but also in some ways they're retaining some authority in some of the claims that they made in that prior email. Now, this news comes directly from GOA and Eric Pratt, who is the VP of GOA and is a very good friend of myself and of this channel. I love those guys over there. They're good friends. Now, what happened in this situation is a member of GOA reached out to the ATF, and that member wanted clarification from the ATF on whether or not he could put a pistol brace on one of his firearms. Now, again, I mentioned in the last video, I don't recommend reaching out to the ATF like this. Sometimes it works out where we get additional information like this that we can talk about and kind of raises a red flag to everybody so we know what the ATF is doing. But more often than not, it ends up really bad for individuals. It ends up really bad for the community. So I don't really recommend that you voluntarily reach out to the ATF and ask them for legal guidance. Now, in its response to that request, FIPB, which is a branch of the ATF, responded with the position that federal law requires a pistol with an attached stabilizing brace or stock be registered as a short-barreled rifle. In other words, FIPB advised this GOA member that if a pistol is equipped with a stabilizing brace, then it is an SBR as a categorical matter, irrespective of multiple court orders that the ATF is not allowed to enforce that reasoning. And even despite the fact that the rules, factoring test that the ATF had put in place that had various requirements in it where you would look at things like the surface area of the brace, the weight, the overall length, and other types of criteria like what is the marketing standards for this item, what is the community standard, what do they think about this. It seemed like through this email that the ATF, and at least this employee's interpretation, or maybe guidance that this employee got, is that all of those factors were out the door and simply any pistol with a brace on it was per se an SBR. Now, FIPB continued in this response that despite acknowledging an injunction issued by the Northern District of Texas against this rule, FIPB then posted that irrespective of injunctions against enforcement of the rule, the ATF remains responsible for enforcement of the statutory provisions under the NFA, opining that the ATF may enforce its new view of the law, the rule, and its orders enjoining it notwithstanding. So again, that was very shocking because this email from the ATF seemed to take the position that they can still enforce the pistol brace interpretation, potentially not just the rule, but how they had come to this conclusion. And they could do that without actually having to rely on the rule itself, which was struck down. They could do it exclusively through the actual statutory text of the NFA. So they say essentially pistol brace and lawsuits be damned, we can still do whatever we want. Now, in response to that, GOA asked for clarification from the FIPB. They wanted a response by January 8th, but they received no response. And because of that, they then elevated their concerns higher up in the ATF. In this new letter, GOA demanded immediate clarification on that FIPB email and what was stated in that email. And they wanted additional information on what is the ATF's actual position on this issue. In this response, GOA stated that we demand your strong assurances that it is your understanding that the mere fact that a pistol is equipped with a stabilizing brace does not dispositively render it to be a short-barreled rifle. Finally, we demand your guarantee that ATF intends to comply with the district court orders enjoining enforcement of the rule. This compliance includes refraining from enforcement of the rule's flawed and repudiated theories repackaged in an injunction, sidestepping statutory theory, or any other theory which purports to comply with the injunctions but nonetheless exposes GOA members to criminal liability. And GOA stated that they wanted a response from the ATF by January 14th. Well, the ATF has now responded, and in many ways, the ATF is in fact walking back those statements that were made in the FIPB email. They're walking back a lot of those prior statements, but at the same time, they're still holding on and claiming that under the statutory text of the NFA and GCA, they believe they still have the authority to regulate braced pistols as SBRs. The response of the ATF states that ATF agrees the statement that federal law requires a pistol with an attached stabilizing brace or stock be registered as a short-barreled rifle is overbroad. On November 8th, 2023, the United States District Court for the Northern District of Texas stayed the final rule in its entirety, preventing further action in reliance on the final rule nationwide. The United States has appealed this decision. While this appeal is pending, the ATF is complying with the court's order. They then state that the district court's order does not prohibit enforcement of the NFA or GCA. ATF remains responsible for enforcement of statutory provisions pertaining to a rifle having a barrel or barrels of less than 16 inches in length under the NFA and short-barreled rifles under the GCA. The statutory definition of rifle under the NFA and GCA includes, in relevant part, firearms with a rifle bore that are designed or redesigned, made or remade, and intended to be fired from the shoulder. A firearm designed and intended to be fired from the shoulder that meets the statutory definition of a short-barreled rifle contained in the NFA must be made and transferred in accordance with the statutory requirements of the NFA. So in response, there are two main things that we need to break down. First, in that first paragraph, the ATF acknowledges that initial email response stating that any braced pistol is per se an SBR is in fact overly broad and it's incorrect. It doesn't take into account all these other factors that the ATF claims that they would take into consideration to determine if something's actually an SBR. They also acknowledge that there are multiple court decisions out there, including the nationwide vacatur of the pistol brace rule that vacates this entirely, and therefore under the rule, the ATF does not have the authority to enforce that. And they also expressly state that they will continue to comply with the decisions of those courts. But then we need to talk about that second paragraph, because in that second paragraph, there again is an interesting shift in that, approach by the ATF. In that section and in the second paragraph, the ATF essentially reiterates that under the statutory text, they still believe that they have the power to regulate SBRs. They also mentioned that the decision of the courts there, by Judge Reed O'Connor, by Judge Kaczmarek, and all the judges out of the federal district courts in Texas, including also the ones out of the 8th Circuit, who have also addressed this in the FRAC case, they're essentially saying that all of those decisions, all of those rulings were directed exclusively to just the pistol brace rule, just to the regulation that the ATF put in place. They mentioned that those rulings of the courts did not block the ATF from enforcing the statutory text itself, which is included in the NFA and GCA. They claim that it only blocks the pistol brace rule. This to me sounds a lot like them kind of reaffirming some of the prior email that we were all concerned about, And it seems like their approach is that the ATF still believes that they could potentially can and potentially will enforce brace restrictions just under a claimed statutory authority. The email kind of remains vague enough on what they intend to do, what their position actually is as far as enforcement. And in some ways, it simply is just leaving the door open for them to say, hey, we believe we still have this authority under the text alone, under the statute alone. We don't need the pistol brace rule. If we want to still regulate these items, we can do it just under the pure text. So very interesting developments in this whole pistol brace issue. The ATF acknowledges the multiple decisions that have blocked their current enforcement of the pistol brace rule, while still at the same time claiming that the NFA allows them to restrict these items. This is something definitely we're going to be keeping our eyes on. So as we get more information, I will let you guys know. But as always, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And never forget, this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.